Welcome, Todd. Nice to have you here.
Thank you, Benzie. Nice to be here.
Yeah, I came up with a nickname for you that you need to know. It's it's Todd the God, because loads of people used to say to me how amazing you were in the presence module when you were a trainer, and they often commented about it, and I was like, oh, Todd the God, and that's who you are in the training space. So there you are. No pressure for today. I don't know what you make of that.
Well, actually, I had heard something like that, and certainly as a trainer, it didn't always help the presence module. People come in with loads of expectations. Not only is the presence module going to be amazing, but I'm getting trained by a literal god that I expect the skin to come off my face and lightning to strike my brain. So oftentimes I'd have to speak to expectations and assumptions. So yeah, inviting anyone listening to derobe me of God status, me immortalize me. I'm but a fundamentally flawed human here to share whatever is useful.
Nice. Well, we can definitely dig into that flawed human today and kind of unpack that, shall we say. But before we do you want to introduce yourself in terms of who you are as a coach and what you do? And anyone that's listening, actually, before we do that, what we're doing here is your personal journey to coaching success. So we're going to have a look at not only your commercial, I guess, journey, but your personal journey and success. I say lightly, because I think we're always redefining that. But yeah, let's start at the beginning and find out who you are and what you do as a coach and what's the makeup of your business right now.
Okay. Before I do that, can I just get one thing out of my head? Otherwise, it's going to be haunting me the whole way.
Yeah, go for it.
My equivalent of Todd the God is when I was having a shower this morning, but our theme tune came in. Winnie the Pooh, it was Brinsley and Todd, coaching uncaged. And I was going to say that, and otherwise it's going to be going whoop, whoop, whoop around my head. There we go.
And I guess, yeah, that's your musical background, right, as well, which perhaps we can explore shortly.
So what was your question about coaching? What's my coach approach?
Yeah, so who are you as a coach and what's the makeup of your business right now?
Okay. Well, not to get too nitpicky straight away on who am I as a coach, but straight away I find myself confronted by the word coach. And it reminds me a lot of the journey that I've been on, where I came through Animas as a student, I was training for Animas as a trainer, and I felt myself kind of in this bubble of coachness, and with like little arms sticking out and parts of me wanting to kind of move beyond the coach label. So now I identify more broadly as a practitioner, and coaching is a tool within a bigger toolbox. So I'm going to speak to that. I can tell you who I am as a coach within the bigger toolbox, and then you can unpack the bigger toolbox if you want.
Love that. I really love that. And I had a similar conversation recently, and I used the word practitioner because I have some similar, perhaps, challenges with the word coach, or perhaps others' definition of the word coach or ownership of the word coach. That's really interesting to hear. But so let's have a look at who you are as a practitioner. And I did notice that word on your website, actually, that I was reading this morning. So yeah, tell us who you are as a practitioner then, and what your business looks like.
Okay, so zooming back, coach to practitioner. As a practitioner, the thing I feel really passionate about and love is just bringing my wholeness. And I think part of that is inviting other people to bring their wholeness. So as a practitioner, I'm a coach, I'm a supervisor. I know I'm going into modalities a bit. I'm an energy worker, I'm a musician. I'm just a bit of a maverick at times, if that suits the space. And I just kind of bring all of that. But what I'm really doing and focusing on more these days is helping other practitioners access their mojo. I just realized over time, I just had to have an honest conversation with myself. I love working with practitioners, not because it's supervision necessarily. It's not a supervision space, which has its own role and might be around ethics or skills or casework and client work, but just something about practitioners. I don't know if it's the musician part of me that used to love sitting around another musician, another guitarist, and jamming, but I just love practitioners. I love their mission. I love their emotional intelligence. I love the challenges of practitioners. And so now I'm just owning that and saying, I work with practitioners, and to that work, I bring that label of currently practitioner empowerment, within which is coaching, supervision, energy work, creative approaches, other alternative things if they serve the space, with a kind of spiritual, heart-centered foundation. So speaking about this being a business channel and all, I've recently kind of been jumbling up sentences that I feel kind of somewhat capture that, even for me. And a recent one was helping heart and soul-led practitioners nourish and deepen themselves and their work. And I think that is not necessarily perfect, but from where I am right now, it's me kind of being a bit more real and vulnerable with that niche for myself, which isn't a chosen mental niche. It's almost a love affair that I've avoided. And I just kind of come face to face with it and said, I love you. And I admit that. Let's make a life together. That's how it feels.
Nice. Why did you avoid it?
Great question. Well, I think one of the things was, why did I avoid it? Let me just find the honest answer for you there. Some of it was just, maybe I wasn't ready to settle down. I wanted to play the field. I wanted to explore. And I think I was still experimenting as well. I did my supervision diploma. I was training for Animas. So I had quite high visibility in Animas. Had a lot of people coming towards me. Oh, can you supervise me for this? Can you supervise me for that? And I was saying yes to a lot of things because I had no reason not to say yes. I was still exploring. I was still growing. And also people coming from outside those spaces as well. But I think, maybe avoid is the wrong word. Maybe it's more, I wasn't ready to, maybe let me put that a little more kind of perhaps out there as a metaphor. It's almost like the practitioner empowerment, that kind of work was like some kind of magical mad inventor's ship, that was slowly building itself, supervision wing, coaching wing, energy work wing, and I just wasn't ready to be boarded. And then as I was experimenting with all of this stuff, it's like that as its own way of working suddenly went, you are now ready to board. There's a different way of working that has now emerged out of your experimentation that wasn't truly visible to you before, but now it is. You may begin. So perhaps there was some avoidance as well. Perhaps it was about me owning my energy work side, my woo side a bit more. But also I think genuinely the work itself hadn't emerged out of all of the experimentation as well.
Got you. So you were almost building this kind of integrative process or integrative practice. Did you have all of those skills before you became a trainer with Animas, or is this something you've picked up over the years?
Well, that's a great question. Actually, it kind of makes me think back to how this all evolved. I was basically doing magic sessions, I called them, and energy work sessions, totally separate to coaching. And I was doing those kind of sessions before I started training with Animas. I trained in Animas in 2017. Then I started as a coach. And I think in my mind, I made that separate. So I'm a coach and over here, I'm an energy worker. And then over time, I noticed that my intuition in coaching spaces was really high. And this sort of energy tuning inness, let's say, kind of really came into play. And then somewhere along the way, I just thought, F it, throw the whole lot in a blender. Why am I cutting myself into little cubes? And I think more interestingly, clients would come to me for, say, conventional coaching or supervision. And without me saying anything, even though I hadn't yet owned it on my website, I'll try and stop doing this too much, stop being that guy. They would say, but what's the other thing that you do? I feel like they would say things like, I feel like I'm getting some quite conventional coaching off you, but there's something more in you that I'm not getting. What is that? And I'll be like, what do you mean, like energy work stuff? They go, yeah, that, can I have some of that? So they literally started pulling it out of me. So I say I put it in a blender. I think in a way I was just responding to the people around me who put me in a blender. It was like who wanted a certain kind of practitioner service from me. And I was just responding to that.
Mm-hmm. That's so interesting. And were these clients or people you were working with that pulled it out you, were they practitioners as well? And do you think it was their level of emotional intelligence or awareness of others as well that helped tease that out of you? Was that just clients that you were working with who weren't practitioners?
No, that's a great question. I feel in the hands of a good interviewer. Thank you, Brinsley. I noticed myself slow. Well, they were practitioners. So yes, did they have that emotional intelligence? Well, I think they definitely did, because I think there's practitioners of lots of different types with lots of different leanings. Some are really, really cognitive and they're laser sharp on thinking. That I tend to attract the more spiritual, heart-led, creative types. And maybe not that the other types couldn't have picked that up. I think there's something in them that maybe sensed it in me. I think thinking about it, I'm not sure this is the case, but perhaps the way I speak on social media, the way I am in the world is very open about all those kind of things. And maybe they'd had an idea of who this Todd character was, and they were just kind of wanting to get the whole picture, the whole spectrum. I know I'm answering your questions in multi-layered ways, but I'll just keep going with that if that's all right. One question is but a doorway into a wonderland.
Yeah, bring all the layers for sure. And I would agree with that as well, because I've followed you on social media and I get that sense of you. And also just reading your website, everything felt aligned with what my experience was of you before, which was this sort of creative, arty, and the words magic and soulful and energy came through in your website. So yeah, I guess I can see how that can come up, where people are working with you, I guess, in a more cognitive way and thinking, what else is there from Todd, and wanting to pull that out of you. And thank you for answering a couple of questions that I probably would have asked anyway. So you trained in 2017, and a lot of your clients are practitioners, and you would say they're heart-led, soulful practitioners. So you've kind of been on a 5-year journey from then. If we were just to look before then, what do I need to know about you that's led you to this point? Your past, your professional experience, what you do. Why do you do this now?
Great question. Well, I started out as a musician in my 20s in the fame game. Please, Todd, stop doing this. In the fame game, as it were. Well, actually, genuinely coming from heart, as a genuinely creative person, really had something inside me I wanted to express in music. But then my ego got involved. It's like how much money and how much success and all that really just made a total mess of my pure heart, if I'm honest. But then I started going to Tantra workshops. My partner's a sexual alchemist. I met her when I was 32, and she was on a really radical growth journey herself. And she would be like, hey, I'm going to this Tantra workshop. Hey, I'm going to this kind of kink workshop. Do you want to come? I was like, yeah, sure, great. So doing lots of these self-development immersive retreats with her really kind of expanded my soul beyond the realms of my investment in my own self, as it were. My you know, Todd is amazing. Todd's this amazing musician. He wants to be famous. Just like it wasn't worth the hustle and bustle and trouble of chasing that. Something more real, more heart connected wanted to emerge. So that's definitely been part of the journey. I then went from music fame game, let's say, into wanting to explore music and healing. And I spent 10 years in CAMHS, Child Adolescent Mental Health Services, really holding these deep spaces for suicidal teenagers, for people who might have tried to kill themselves that morning, but also lots of mental health spectrum, borderline personality disorder, all these kind of spaces. And that was really just about being with the person. Yeah, I had a guitar on my lap, or we were writing a song, but what I noticed is that really they wanted to be with somebody who wasn't trying to fix them, especially in that hospital place, because a lot of people saw them as patients. These adults would come in and go, clipboards, you're a patient, oh my God, you tried to kill yourself, give this person X, Y, Z. Why just come in and go, hey, so, you know, tell me about you. What's your favorite songs? Oh, let's learn that. And I think in hindsight, I was relating them in a way that other people weren't relating to them inside of that medical system. And then once the hospitals figured that out, I would be on the front lines. It would be like, send Todd in. They haven't spoken to any adults. They're on strike. Send Todd in. And then I would go in with no agenda. I didn't have an agenda. I literally wasn't trying to fix them. And I know that's a coaching term. It's exaggerated if you imagine that these people were in hospital. And then we would just vibe. And after a while, I was like, I love being with people. I love being with these people. This is pretty intense. This is pretty intense environment, because a lot of these people need a lot of space holding, because they could blow up. They could, you know, there's a lot of energy in their systems from just their grief or their trauma. And after a while, I was like, what about people who aren't hospitalized? What about people who haven't been really, really traumatized? Because what I noticed is that all the staff around me, including me, were like, yeah, we need help too with just life. You know, what do you get when life is hard? What's that help? And I think that's the help I needed at that point. And then I became a coach. No, then I went looking for something, found coaching, and off I went. So I don't know if you think that's helpful or not helpful, and perhaps it's longer than an answer than expected, but that's some of the journey about how I got interested in self-development, how I got interested in space holding, able to hold space, but also interested in just people, all the people in the world, and what's the help that they might need going forward, just existing.
Yeah, being with another human being, that's all it is at the end of the day, right? Well, perhaps for some people. What about before that then? And also, actually, just before we go back, Were you a music therapist? Was that the title then? I understand the process, but would you have been described as a music therapist?
I had musical therapy training, but I wasn't technically doing music therapy. It was more music sessions. I used to call them therapeutic music sessions. If I'd have got, and I'm curious about that, because if I'd gone in as a music therapist, they might go, well, you're just another person trying to therapize me, fix me, medicalize me, whatever. But that wasn't how I was going in. It was just, hey, there's this guy called Todd. Do you want to spend some time doing music? So it wasn't technically music therapy. They did then send me to do a music therapy course, and I realized that actually it was probably good that it wasn't music therapy, the way it was working. It was really a relational space for them to start experiencing themselves and investing in themselves and coming out of their shell without having any sense that there was any kind of agenda or anywhere to get to, which may, not necessarily the case, may have been different if it was a course of therapy or something like that.
Yeah, that makes complete sense. So it's very relational and creative rather than billed as a helping conversation.
Yeah, that.
There's lots of transferable skills that you're bringing into the space then when you trained as a coach. You're used to holding space, working with people, very vulnerable people. And also you're bringing in a lot of creativity from your music background, I assume. Who were you before in your formative years that you think has created who you are now? What are the experiences that brought you here?
Formative before my 20s.
So you're a musician in your 20s?
Yeah.
So what do you think's led you to this point? And do you think anything that is of note in your sort of childhood or younger years?
Yeah, let me sit with that. I'm just going to really let flickers of stuff come up with no idea what's true. This isn't something I've really spoken about before. So you're just getting the raw, unfiltered, whatever's about to come out my mouth. Something about being sensitive. Like I was walking around Sainsbury's today. I'm running a retreat in a few days, and I was doing a shop for somebody. And it was so nice and quiet in the supermarket. I said, God, it's so nice and quiet in here. And I thought back to my weekend in London that was really busy with so many people. And I found that quite draining. And I thought, maybe I'm more sensitive than I think that I am in some weird way. That sounds like a weird sentence. When I think back to my youth, I think of somebody who's very sensitive. And perhaps, and I'm feeling a bit emotional saying this, shamed for being sensitive because I was a male. You're a boy, don't cry, boys don't cry, all of that kind of stuff, bottle it up, all of that kind of stuff. But I think I was always really sensitive. And there's a flip side to this coming up. Gentle, sensitive, creative. I was always drawing, I was always interested in music. And there's something about that sensitivity that I bring into sessions, like say if I'm reading people energy work wise, I can't do that if I'm not sensitive. Like this whole idea of as a coach, say in the presence module, we're an antenna in the space. If you're really, really, really sensitive antenna, that it can be intuitive in coaching, but it can also go into energy work where I can read people without them saying a single word, really, really detailed and surprising ways. But I can't do that unless I'm really sensitive. So there's something about that, I think. Something definitely about a love of people, like this almost kind of playful puppiness around people potentially. Remember my partner sometimes joke, like, you can get on with anyone, Todd. And what she means by that is if I meet someone and I don't seem like I'm cut from the same cloth with them at all, but there's 1% of them that I like and I get on with it, I'll just play with that 1%. And I don't mind the other 99%. Some people might be like, I don't like that one thing about that person. But like, I don't like 99.9% of that person. But I love that 1% and I'll just play with that. It's just like some part of me almost has that really playful, open heart that is, I know we talk about non-judgmentalness as coaches, but generally coming from that loving connection place, just wanting to bound up to that person and go, hey, you, what are you about? What's in you? That kind of loving little heart. And then there's that sensitivity. And I think that's something that I've had throughout my childhood, and perhaps I just needed to find a form. And maybe you started writing music, and that's where I was in my musician years. And that's the part of me that became a healer. But I think also we grow up and we mature. And when it became a uni and in my 20s, perhaps it got a little more hedonistic and influenced by hormones and all that stuff. But it's always been there. for better and worse. Certainly for worse, it's quite hard oftentimes being that sensitive. So yeah, that's the first thing that I suppose comes up when you talk about where's all this come from.
I appreciate you rolling with that on the fly, and I got that sense of you that you can read people as well. I don't know if you remember the first time we ever met. I was going to do some DJ event for Animas. It was when the Life of Zoom was on, and I had loads of nervous energy. And I remember how calm and present you were in the conversation, and I felt really seen by you. I knew that you could see me and see what I was feeling. And I always took that away from that moment or that interaction with you. So interesting to hear about you reflect on that skill that you have. Thank you for kind of looking back at those early years, and I guess looking at the magic and soulfulness of you, and why you do what you do, and some of those skills that you have inherently. Perhaps they're learned. I don't know. Would you say they're inherent or learned?
Great question. Well, I mean, oftentimes in sessions, say if I'm doing the magic sessions or the energy part of sessions, and people are like, "Oh my God, wow, how did you know that about me?" I personally feel that anyone can do that. It's just a level of listening. People talk about coaching, active listening, this listening. I'm talking about listening on an energetic level where you start to trust the real whispers that, like, surely you can't know that about their boyfriend who's not even here. Or you can't feel the tension in the shoulder and why it's tight. Like, you don't know surely that it's because of X, Y, Z. Or do you? Can you pick that up? And it's just starting to really listen and trust. So I think I'm not special. I don't see myself as special. I just see myself as really, 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 really listening, especially in those sessions. And to do that, I make myself transparent. Like, I have to be so quiet inside that I can hear you louder than I can hear me, that I can hear your feelings louder than I can hear my own feelings. Otherwise, I can't hear you. And that to me takes a sort of type of surrender of self. It's not about Todd and his annoying quote marks. It's about you and my genuine curiosity to know you, to kind of, you know, in a way, spiritually reach out and go, ding, kind of ET finger going, phone home, that two souls kind of touching. So I had to put Todd aside, to put my mind aside to hear the person in front of me at that deeper level. But I can't do that if I'm really attached to my ego and I make it about me. And I think my musical journey really helped me let go of that, because I've experienced for 10 years what a mess you can make of something beautiful if you really, really make it about for me anyway, my success or this or that. It became a sort of ego twisted thing. I'm going on a lot with your answers here. I can't even remember what your question was, but hopefully that's okay.
No, it's a really fascinating answer. I'm just trying to remember what the question was myself. Oh, that was it. Is it inherent or was it learned? Yeah, and as you talk about music, it kind of resonates with me as well, in that sense of the monetizing of something can spoil the art of something, and that's what I'm hearing from your musical journey, and what led you perhaps to looking at being with another human being and taking your music into that space.
One thing I would add, I appreciate your eyes were doing the thinky thing. I hope you don't mind me jumping in. And
go for it.
In interviewer mode, or my coach ego wants to say, Todd, you look like a guy who's just over rambling. You don't do this in the coach space. No, I don't, but I'm the interviewee here. I can ramble. That's invited, isn't it? I think one of the things is curiosity. You know, coaches often talk about curiosity, don't they? Be curious. How curious? How curious? Because I'm again fascinated by single words. Coach, it's a word. But unpack that word, it's a library. Curiosity, it's a word, but what shades of curiosity? Just how curious are you? And for me, I think a lot of that curiosity was about myself, scanning my own dark underbelly. What's under that rock? Oh my God, I'm a hideous person. Woo! Just like really getting to know myself and taking that curiosity and kind of love of life and being alive, that real deep curiosity to other people. So I would say perhaps we all have curiosity, going back to your can it be learned question, but maybe if curiosity was a lemma, how willing and curious are you able to be? And people often talk about you can only take people as deep as you've gone. How curious are you willing to be about yourself? Because perhaps your own curiosity muscles, perhaps there's only so much you can do over there if you're not willing to look over here. And I think that's a lot of the self-work that people can do as people as coaches and practitioners is get really effing self-curious, which isn't always comfortable. Anyway, little side sojourn there around curiosity as a possible something.
Thank you. I think you kind of started to answer my next question, and I was wondering, what is the work that you've done on yourself to be able to show up in the way that you show up, and describe that with letting the ego go?
So a lot of the sort of Tantra and spiritual workshops I did with my partner across my 30s. I remember one particular Tantra workshop where it was called Osha Leela. You need to know that's about a week long. First time I walked in, I'm just going to check here. Do you mind my answers being too long? You rein me in. Are they too long?
No, they're perfect. Go for it. Multi-layers, long answers. Let's have them all.
At this festival called Osha Leela, I walked in the door and I was like, what a crock of hippie beep. What a load of beep, beep, beep. By about day 3, I was like, oh my God, I dropped all my armor. And I think that's why a lot of those courses, the work you do is often naked. It's not about, oh my God, let's be naked. It's like, let's de-armor, let's strip off who we think we are and just get back to our birthday suit, how we popped in, and almost move beyond the identity, because perhaps we can identify with clothes and our sort of style in some kind of way. But if we're naked, then what are we identifying with? What's left? So there's a lots of that kind of tantric work going into spaces and eye gazing. A lot of Tantra is about eye gazing, seeing beyond the person and into their eyes. And I would go in rooms initially, at this point, it was my early 30s, reasonably libidious young man, and it'd be like, oh, she's nice, I love a connection with her. And then as you looked in everyone's eyes, it's like, I've got no connection with that person at all, but I've got a beautiful connection with that person. And I just started to see the insides much more than the outsides. So I think definitely all of that Tantra work really helped. The space holding around the mental health, suicidal teenager stuff, obviously that really helped me hold the space. Are we still on the question about what about my formative years? Yeah. And another thing that helped is my work in kink. And what that means is basically, are we ready to go here? Basically, say, taking the tantric stuff, so let's go into tantric kink, where you're exploring shadow realms, you're exploring all of those parts of our personalities. Not necessarily, it doesn't have to be that to be kinky, but let's say, I'll just start with there. Say I've got parts of my personality like that are submissive or dominant, like that are villains. They're the villain. They want to hurt that person. These are kind of forbidden parts that in general society are like, well, you can't put that part away and never let it out. And sometimes those parts, I think, if they're given a space to play and explore, can become conscious. So conscious kink might be a term there. So you can get out your victim or your villain, just using simple culture terms from the drama triangle, let's say, and say, hey, and have a conscious conversation. I'm going to get out my villain part and it's going to go a bit like this, and you'll get out your victim part and go a bit like that. And we'll have a scene, and we'll have some agreements around what is safe and what's too much. And we'll have a safe word or a traffic light system, so we know if it's going too far. And we're totally, utterly conscious, because we're treading through these sort of forbidden lands in this very sensitive place. Now, if you're willing to do all that and you do all that, what does that give you as a practitioner? Personally, I think what it's given me is, when I feel little beasties lurking in me in a session, I'm like, oh, there's a part of me that thinks that might want to kind of subconsciously lead this conversation because it's quite a dominant character, but I'm just going to let it do that because I know it quite well, so I don't need to do that. Or some part of me that's, oh wow, this person in front of me is really powerful. I must feel a bit like inferior here. We're like, I know how to feel inferior. I've done that many times in kink scenes. I'll just let that pass through. So it gives you that kind of almost internal world intelligence to know your internal landscape and all of your beasties and parts so that they don't pollute the space. Massively helps me. And sometimes if the clients I know well, I'll name them, or I'll just go, oh, wow, I can hear that part of me, and we'll just laugh and we'll just let it drift past. So they feel so safe because they can talk about all of their kind of sexy, filthy stuff and know that I'm not going to get leechy or clingy, or I'm not going to lean in and again pollute the space or have undercurrents of energy that something's, at play. So it can help in so many ways. But the other thing is the contracting and the cleanliness. Like if you're going to, permission to put this just in really graphic terms, I'll stay on hopefully acceptable. If you and I were going to have a kink scene and we were going to get completely naked and do stuff, we probably want to agree a few things, yes? Well, actually,
always
contracting, exactly. Well, Todd, I'm comfortable with you touching me there in this kind of way, but I'm not comfortable with you touching me there. Okay, thank you for letting me know, Bridget. And how about this? No, that's not right for me. That doesn't feel good. So the level of contracting detail you get to once you start dealing with pain, naked bodies, sexuality is most of the time potentially way more detailed than coaching and supervision. So if you bring that into coaching supervision, you're like, oh, I get this. I get this. And you've got that level of detail and cleanliness. So I often always think back to those kind of spaces when I'm with somebody. Consent, to me, it comes down to agreement, consciousness, consent, awareness. And all of that, I think, helps the dance go deeper. So going back to the way I work as a practitioner, people can go into these spaces with me because it's safe for them, because I can hold it, because it's clean, because I know my beasties and those beasties aren't going to attack them or shit on their doorstep, and because we're in beautiful, clean agreement. And continual re-agreement and consent, because people could change. It's fine if you touch me there. Oh, actually, no, it's not. I changed my mind. Okay.
Absolutely fascinating. Thank you. That was such an interesting answer. And it makes complete sense when I think of you in the space, egoless, listening cleanly without those beasties. We spent a lot of time looking at, I guess, some of the psychological sides of you and, you know, how you can show up as you do. I'm just going to kind of bring us back to, and all that is fascinating. I mean, I'd love to keep going on that thread, but looking at your business building journey,
yeah,
I'm just going to bring us back to where you are now.
Yeah.
And my understanding is you're working with practitioners, soul-led practitioners. From what I've seen, you do in-person work, you run retreats.
Yeah.
What's the sort of commercial element of your business? I understand who you work with, but how do you work with them?
So just define for me what you mean by commercial element. What
makes you money? You know, it's what's building your business. Yeah.
Got you, love that. So I would say there's the private stuff, which I'll zoom in on now, but there's also other work. I definitely like having not just the private stuff. So interesting, the retreats thing, they make me money, but financially speaking, it's madness in a way. Like I was in Sainsbury's this morning shopping, buying flowers for my retreat client that got coming tomorrow evening. I was like, well, the maths does not add up here. This is love. This is a labor of love, you know, and there's almost like there's only so many retreats I can do because mathematically it doesn't add up. I charge X amount for a day, which is less than I would got as a trainer, but yeah, I'm, you know, preparing their room and I'm doing lots of loving things in the background that hold the space actually. So but anyway, just to kind of keep it on the financial, so yes, I'm doing the retreats, but I also do online work with clients in, you know, kind of 6 session packages that we're all used to hearing or perhaps doing ourselves. I run 90-minute sessions for those. I'm going to be running more groups hopefully in the new year as well. So at the minute it's a combination of mostly online one-to-one work, groups. Occasionally I've run a couple of supervision groups, more online groups coming up, and then retreats 1 or 2 a month.
Nice. Okay, so there's a nice little mix there, and that's all with practitioners.
I'm just taking a moment to just scan my kind of client base in my head. Just a little scanning needle. Yeah, I mean, the funny thing is even people I think who aren't practitioners are. For some reason, it's just happened like that. A lot of my clients have come from the yesteryears, have come from my 30s. I met them on Tantra retreats or whatever, that kind of thing. And once they found out I was a practitioner, they all gravitated towards me. But perhaps because of that history, they themselves went on to be Tantra teachers, or they went on to be professional dominatrices, or they went on to be kinesiologists. So just by coincidence, really, in that respect, a lot of them just happen to be practitioners, even though I don't necessarily always see them like that. But yeah, a lot of them are, all of them almost, in my private domain, in my private practice.
So if we look back to 2017 now, you trained and qualified with Animas, and you've been on this 5-year journey. Something that you shared with me is that you're mid-evolution.
Yeah.
I'd love to hear about what you were at the start and why you're now mid-evolution, if we just kind of chronologically track that from your qualification.
Yeah. Okay. And just an invitation, Brinsley, please, if you feel my answers are going too far out, just feel free to last zoom and go, wait, Todd, no, that's not the girl.
This is great stuff. Keep them coming.
not the answer I'm looking for. So tracking my evolution, mid-evolution now, but going back to 2017. Well, in 2017, it was very much like the doors were open. Like, I'm a coach. I'll just coach anyone. I'll coach you on your six pack. I'll coach you on your sex life. I'll coach you on the angels you think you see, whatever. I was just completely I was unattached. I wasn't attached to being a coach completely. In fact, I went to the Animas course thinking I might not want to be a coach. I don't want to back myself into a corner insisting that be a coach. This might be a self-development course for me. So I just sort of opened to the world, that I wanted some practice clients, and people came through those doors. And I suppose at that time, it didn't take me long to think, I actually don't like coaching people on things that are performance-based. Like, let me really help you with your to-do list, or just stuff that isn't at a deeper level. Shifts of being, shifts of emotional landscape, deeper self-awareness. That's the stuff that didn't take me long to figure out. I much prefer working on those levels. So probably after a year, I was like, yeah, I'll just kind of narrow slightly, but I still left it quite wide. And perhaps the process has been over the years of just slowly zooming in, chunking down, you might say, into really the people I love working with, and the way I love working, and the themes I love working on. And the dance, I keep coming back to the dance, and that's a bit of a coaching cliche. What is the dance between you and your client? But something about the quality of the space and the intimacy and depth. Actually, depth is a big one. So let me just see if there's anything else in there that might feed into this answer. But it also just went on the fact I was on a learning journey. So when I trained as a supervisor, it kind of went like this. I'm doing coaching. I have no idea what coaching is. Oh, I'm kind of getting the hang of it. Oh, okay, I think I know as I'm a coach. Oh, now I'm a training as a supervisor. I'm completely rubbish at this. I have no idea what supervision is. And I almost reopened the doors at that point. And my prices went down as a supervisor. I invited a load of people in again. So it's a bit of a mishmash of a couple of years, leading to now. Save me with a succinct question, Brinsley. Otherwise, it's going to be a sprawling mess.
Well, you said intense few years, and now looking to a more scalable future, or sustainable might have been the word you used in some of our exchanges.
Very intense. Yeah, I think for me, I was training at Animas, Corona times. Perhaps it felt intense as well because the world just felt compressed, lockdown, all of that. And I had more clients than I could handle, actually. Possibly because I had a blend of coaching clients and supervision clients at low prices, and as an Animas trainer, again, I had high visibility, and people go, oh, I want to work with that Todd guy. And yeah, it was just kind of piling in on me. And I think actually to kind of lead this into the evolution I'm in now, I realized that, okay, this is what's happened. I've opened the doors to clients, but creating zero business structure whatsoever. I just kind of managed to just about, okay, what's Calendly? Somebody give me, okay, Calendly. I need some kind of website. Okay, website. But actually it got to the point where I had more clients than I had infrastructure. It's like, okay, now I'm just stressed. If someone says to me, have you got any space in your practice? I don't even know the answer. So I need to figure out, like, how many clients do I want and where are they going to go? And I just like almost had to push pause on the influx of people, take a sabbatical, and just say, okay, I need to build structure that actually can hold space for me and my clients. And I became more aware that it's not just about holding space in a session, it's about holding space for journeys, but also almost like for business, or even the business holding space for me at times. So I can be in my own business structure as a practitioner, working with his client, but know that around me, there's some kind of structure that I don't have to constantly, I forgot I should be in another meeting right now. that is a bit more held and a bit more automated and a bit more thought through and intentional and reliable. And something around that is where I am now. It's building that kind of, I keep just calling it infrastructure that allows me to be more relaxed, more organized, more intentional, and more aware of who's coming in my practice and out my practice and all of that stuff.
Mm. It reminds me of something else you shared then, and I'll ask you about it, but I want to read it specifically, or word for word. Discovering that who you are is how you coach, but also who you are is how you run your business. What is it about you that had you run your business in this way, and you've got to this point where you're like, I need to get my infrastructure sorted? What is it about you that's kind of created that version?
The first answer is incompetence, Brinsley. Because if I knew better or differently, I might have created the structure first. So in a way, a joke, but actually it's probably what is it about me is that I'm an experiential learner and I like just beginning. Like I noticed a lot of coaches be like, let me build my business. I need my brand. I need my cards. I need my logo. I've got everything trademarked. They spent God knows how much money on that without a single client. I was like, clients, yay, let's do this. Like, and just kind of like that scene in The Wrong Trousers, you know, Wallace and Gromit, where the track's going out. Do you remember that scene?
I don't.
But imagine you're on a little toy train, and the only track in front of you is a track you've just thrown with your own hand. So you're just like, next bit of track, next bit of track, next bit of track, just kind of as the train's going along, just building the very next bit of track I needed. So I say incompetence jokingly, but I think the spirit for me was just, let's begin. But perhaps it reached that point where things ballooned more, and then I needed to come back into doing the structure. That's not necessarily wrong or right. People who build a structure first and then welcome the clients in, that might be their way of doing things. For me, I think sometimes I just begin and then perhaps get to a point where I need to say, wait a second, let me just do a bit more work on the inside. But there's a lot of other dimensions to that question, if you want me to keep going.
What other dimensions?
Well, this idea of who you are is how you run your business makes me think of my partner. So she runs a business and she's been doing it longer than I have, and she's spent quite a bit of money on a lot of experts to help her, and she's further ahead. She's just finishing a 100th episode of a podcast. And so often I ask her things and I realize that, no, that's not right for me. I was like, okay, that's interesting. What's going on there then? So it's a very direct and easy comparison with me, even say just with her. She's very, very organized, very, amazing person who can stay consistent for 100 podcast episodes. I have no idea. So many things that she does are really brilliant, on it, succinct, consistent, all that kind of stuff. And I think for me, it's like, I never want to wake up in the morning and think I have to post on social media or I have no business. That's just not what I want in my life. I'd rather post when I feel it in my heart. Otherwise, I feel like I'm just like, hey, supervision. I don't know. There's something about that, like a free flow of like, it's more important, and maybe it's a value stacking, I'm not sure. It's more important for me to be me in the world, or maybe it's not that. It's like, let me be me, let me get my groove on, let me flow, let me curl in at times and go, no, I don't want to be in the world. I'm in my little quiet sleepy mouse mode. Oh, I do want to be in the world. That's okay. I don't want to insist that I'm 24/7 Duracell bunny. Let me just be okay with that. Let me be okay with how I am, and my business, you have to deal with this. I'm not going to bend myself to do the business model that I think everyone should do, posting 1 million times a day, doing all these kind of things, because that's just a machine. It's an idea. It's not a human, is it? It's an idea. I need to make it fit me and say, okay, well, I'm not going to design something that means I have no business if I don't post all the time, or anything like that, or put on any kind of facade when I'm posting anything. So something around that. I'm still learning this, Brinsley. If this answer seems a bit not quite fully formed, I'm still learning, oh, this feels right, but that doesn't feel right. And maybe it's just even down to that feeling. Like I joined a coach's business community quite early on, thinking back, actually, I'd almost forgotten this. That was very much like, we'll show you all the things to do. You do this, you get your mailing list to whatever by doing a lead magnet, and then you do this, and then you do that. And it really just felt like I'd suddenly been squished into a little box and put on a production line and was having to do all these things. I thought, wow, that does not feel good in any way. I'd rather it be what it has been, so going back to my earlier self-esteem competence, I'd reclaim that word and say, I'd rather it be this non-linear evolution and be true to me than have been regimented and me all the way being like, but this isn't me, but this isn't me, but this isn't me, but this isn't me. So something around that. It's almost like, makes me think of this book I've got over there, which is a leadership book, but it's around music. And it says yes to the mess. Saying yes to the mess. And something about that, like in jazz music, and you might going to hit a few wrong notes, but just just play a few right notes afterwards and it sounded like you did it on purpose. just something about that. I think it's like a wonky, beautiful dance forwards. And I think something in me has, even till right now in our conversation, seen that as a bit wrong and incompetent. But actually, no, maybe there's a process there. Maybe they're still moving forward. It just isn't linear or typical necessarily, but perhaps it's got its own beautiful logic to it, that it makes sense to it, even if to no one else looking in, sometimes me.
And did you know this retrospectively? Are you talking in hindsight, or are you talking from a place where you realized it straight away that this is not you? You've gone to this business building course and you're like, nah, I'm not doing this. Or did you do it and think this is not for me?
I realized almost straight away. I joined it was like a 6-month thing. I was like, wow, oh my, wow, you have to be such a good little robot to do all these things. Like, where's my intuition going to come in this? I mean, this looks mathematically accurate, but there's no room for my intuition or what feels right to me. And perhaps it's just my leaning. It has to feel right to me. So I joined that for 6 months. And I think I was on their kind of back-end website looking at the resources twice. And I was like, oh, well, that was a waste of money. And then I left. And actually, I've heard that from quite a few coach friends or supervisees. Not from that course necessarily, but oftentimes they'll go into a business structure with a business coach who says it has to be like this, and this, and they've got a set process that they say this is how you do it. And if that doesn't fit that person, they almost feel broken or wrong, or certainly like they spent a lot of money that wasn't useful to them. So perhaps there's something in that of us all realizing there is no one way. And perhaps the thing is to look at, like, makes me think of going to the cinema, the old cinema, when you've got the old pick and mix. Standing back and going, okay, if I'm the sovereign of my own business, I have to take responsibility that no one's necessarily going to save me. And I have to try things and go, well, that didn't work, and that didn't work, and end up walking out with my own business pick and mix that actually is bespokely me. And who's going to know our own business pick and mix but us?
Some awesome metaphors in there, or analogies. I never know the difference between them two, but I can see you laying down the track as the train's coming, eating your pick and mix. And I get this real sense that it's always about being in flow, being organic, and you're an experiential learner, like you say. And that means starting and then learning on the journey, rather than having this infrastructure and then building the client base from there.
Yeah, and I think I'm definitely a flow person, but what I've also realized is too much flow equals a swamp. So think about a river. A river needs banks, otherwise it's a swamp or just a mess. And I think I got so into flow with so many clients, like, okay, yeah. Well, it's getting a bit messy now. Like, actually, even I could do a structure, and I'm the flow man. Like, let's get some structure in here. And that analogy of like a river has banks and then it can flow. Like, structure helps flow, I suppose, is where I'm going with this. In a way, and music, I think, is a great example. You've got a consistent beat, the holding the backdrop, and then the beep a dab and boo dad and do that can go over the top of it. But if there was none of that, it would just be. So it's that balance between the known structure, consistency, perhaps, and then something that can hold flow, so that's together you get something that works or makes sense. And I think I almost went too into flow, not enough structure. And realizing that I can't flow anymore as much freely as I'd like to, or as under volume, because I feel a lot of projects wanting to birth themselves in me. Almost my soul was crying, give me more structure. Going back to the river analogy, we need bigger banks because more water's coming. We need bigger banks. Build me bigger banks because there's stuff right here wants to come. So it's something about that dance between structure and flow. It's where I'm at right now.
That is you in your mid-evolution. Is there anything else in your mid-evolution right now?
So do you want me to get really nitty-gritty of what this looks like on a practical level?
Are we talking about finance, granular level, or more like what are you actually doing?
What do I even mean by infrastructure?
Yeah, let's have a look at that. I think there could be some value in there for any coaches or anyone setting up a business who might be mid-evolution.
Yeah. Well, for me, one of the things I noticed was client journeys. I just wanted a bit more holding in that. Like, I used to print out my client notes and they would be over there and other things would be over here. And I thought, I just want one place. So I started looking into, I don't know if they're called client management systems or something jazzy. And I think I need something like this. So what I've got now, and I've just been using for a couple of weeks, is one kind of base count where I got client profiles and I can write my notes or dictate from my notes afterwards, and they go into my client profile. I can see where their next appointments are. I can see how many appointments they've got left. There's a shared space where we can share voice notes and emails within the system that has its own app. I can create forms. So with these retreats, I can send a form so people can not only share what they want to get from the retreat, but do they want, what kind of milk do they want in the tea? I need to know that, that kind of stuff. So creating these forms that lead to payment things that have payment plans that, if you know, and contracts built in, this whole system where things become a bit more automated, thought through and fluid, and I'm not having to hold it all. It's all within one program that is a sort of one-stop shop that does invoices, billing, packages, how far through are we, all the forms, testimonials, just a lot of the client journey, hopefully from beginning, during and afterwards. I'm sure that's not the whole things we need to consider as coaches, but for me right now, that feels something I needed to be more held.
That sounds like an awesome tool. What's the program that you're using? Did you say it's called Basecamp, or was that just your description of it?
That's your future one. That's not a bad name, is it? Basecamp is it? This one's called practice.do. I looked at other ones. Power Diary is one that a lot of practitioners use, but oftentimes more counselors and therapists. Paper Bell, I actually really liked. It was just quite expensive. Practice.do at the minute, I'm not trying to sell them as a company, but there's some things it doesn't do, but at the minute it's grandfathered in at $200 a year. So I'm paying like $15 a month for Calendly. This comes out as $17 a month, but I've got way more functionality. And actually what I find, it makes me think of this meme I saw a picture the other day of somebody lying in bed asleep, and then somebody lying in bed who was self-employed asleep with all of these worries in their head. What about this? What about that? What about this? And I noticed, since kind of working within this structure of this platform, that my brain would go to, what about that? And then it would be like, oh, it's got that. I don't need to worry about that. So it almost as if it was my own personal VA camp. Oh, that reminds me, I've got a VA as well. I can speak about that. I'd almost outsourced some of my thinking, some of my having to self-structure to this platform. And it definitely has made me more calm. And it's definitely made me more considered as well, because I had to think, okay, what do I want to say in my contracts? And what do I want to say in that? So more intentional, I think.
Mm-hmm. So as we look at the practical there, and that sounds like a really, really useful tool for you to kind of build these banks around that river. What about the emotional for you when you've built this business over the last 5 years? And perhaps you've touched on some of it, but what are the emotional hurdles that you had to overcome or go through to be where you are now?
Well, are you talking specifically about business, or even doing the thing like the coaching that is within the business?
So building the business, onboarding clients, becoming a coach, I guess there's an element of struggle and strife for most of us when we do that. What's yours?
Yeah, okay, nice. Love that question. I think dealing with me and what I'm good at and what I absolutely suck at. And then also saying, but I say suck at, in a less judgmental way than I might have done. It's like, wow, I'm really not that good at that. Okay, I can get better at it, or I can get help, and just getting realistic around that kind of thing. So I think it's some of the struggle or some of the journey has been getting realistic around what I can and can't do. Going back to, say, my partner, because we live together, it's easy to see what she's great at. I'm like, wow, she's great at that. I am really not. I'm amazing in session. I'm like, in session, all the things you talk about at start, I'm in tune, I'm deep, I'm all these boundaries, it's killer. But outside of sessions, that's my weaker area. Structuring things over time, organization, all of that stuff, making it all glue together as a business. That's something that has sort of been a bit of an Achilles heel for me. And going back into my musician 20s, one of the reasons I didn't do as successful as a musician as I might have done was that. It wasn't my ability to write songs. It was my ability to kind of keep the ship on the water in a more of a mundane executive function kind of way, kind of the boring stuff in a way. So I think it's just being some of that, and a lot of fear. Sure, fears, or fears are what's the word? I was gonna say welcome. I'm not sure how true that is, but certainly a frequent visitor. Can I do this? Actually, there's been many times with EFT. EFT, emotional freedom technique. even though I think I can't remotely coach and I'm totally imposter here, I completely love, honor, and acceptance. Just like sometimes, especially when I started, I was like, some part of me really, and bless it, he was probably trying to keep me safe, was like, you can't do this. You really can't. Even when I would go into trainings, even though I would go into training, say training presence module, people say, oh, you're brilliant at this. And I knew I was when I was in the zone. Doesn't mean that my own brain was going, you can't do this. You can't do this. And sometimes I suppose that it makes me think of something I said to one of my supervisees a while ago. They were saying, what do I need to know as a coach? I'm just starting. And I think one of my answers was something like, well, one, I can't tell you, but if you want some thoughts from me, one of them is, coaching and building a business is much less about coaching than it is about managing yourself, either in the space and all the stuff we talked about, polluting the space, self-awareness, emotion, attunement, outside of the space, all of your, I can do this, I can't do this, I know what I'm doing, I have no idea what I'm doing. Watching your peers, they're doing great, why am I doing this? It's, it's that kind of roller coaster in a way of certainty or complete lack of it. And somehow just it'll give it.
No, that just it's very much resonating, and the work that I do with coaches and trainers as well, all these themes that come up that you discuss, it's very much there front and center, isn't it? Doing the thing is the best thing about it. Like you say, managing everything else is where the challenge is, and particularly our mental frameworks or the chatter.
And to kind of jam around this theme, for me, there's also been some good news. There's some things I've noticed about myself that are assets that was a surprise to me. Is that worth looking at?
Yeah.
So, for example, going back to this experiential learner thing, I think back in I'm going to compare it to my former life, my musician days, there might have been times when I wanted to make sure things are right before stepping. Now it's like, one-on-one retreats. Next day, someone goes, any other kind of sessions? Well, I'm thinking of running retreats. Do you want to try one of them? No idea. Never done it. Just like begin. And then that would happen. I'll be like, how am I doing this? Because I'm willing to be imperfect, because my ego is not getting in my way. I'm not insisting it's great. Whereas in my musician days, I'd be like, I've written a song. I think it's good, but I don't know. And I don't want to play it to anyone for 6 months in case they tell me it's not good, and I'll be crushed. Whereas here I'm beginning. So I'm really happy with that. The other thing in my music days, I was really squirmy with self-promotion. And I noticed that a lot of coaches are squirmy with marketing and self-promotion. And I'm not, because I don't make it about me. Not that that's the key for everyone else's mind, but I don't make it about me. When I'm making it about the practitioner empowerment, my heart is, this is great if it's right for you. If you want these things and you want to explore these things and you want a space to do it, this is a great space that I happen to be running. But it's not about how great I am. It's how great this is. This is not me. This is this, which is great. So here you go. What do you think? Well, and also lack of attachment. It's not like, if you don't have this, then I am not great. If you don't have this, then I am broke, because also that's why I like to do other work. So it takes the financial pressure off. Just something about that lightness with it, and that playfulness, and almost that honoring of the modality of coaching. I know we say, oh, but I'm the coach, so it's about me, but I think I feel a bit more distance to it than that. There's a little more separation between who I think I am and what is happening in the space in the offering, which means that when it comes to speaking about it, marketing, I don't feel that squirmy thing that people think they're blowing their own trumpet. I feel like I'm blowing the trumpet of coaching. That's the difference.
What about when you talk about yourself, though, in promotion? I'm assuming that's fine for you, because in some respects you talk about yourself, I guess, in some posts. I think I've seen some. I think you're referring to there is when you talk about the retreat.
For example,
what's the distinction there for you? Do you not talk about yourself in posts anymore when you market yourself?
And again, I don't massively relate to the word marketing. I get that it's a word, and it has a meaning, and it's not that I'm avoiding the word. I think it's more like sharing self and offering with the world in an open-hearted way is how I approach it. So I don't have any attachment to people buying. People talk about selling. I relate more to, I don't sell. I just put my stuff out there and then approach if it feels right to you. So perhaps marketing in the sense of market stalling is more it. here's my marker stool, and I put some bunting here, and I'm singing my song, my name is Todd and I do this stuff. And you might walk past and go, what an idiot. Or you might walk past and go, oh, that's kind of interesting. So that's something about that feels like I'll just show up with my wares, including me. I do this, I do that, la la la, but this is the work and this is me, and be okay with people walking past. But I think the other thing is willingness to be visible and be seen. And this brings me back to something I remember listening to years ago. It was this really beautiful spiritual talk by an American tracker. In fact, he wrote the book Vitamin N, which is Vitamin Nature. Can't remember his name, but he was like, your talents are not for you. They're for everyone else. It's like, oh, that really landed, especially with at that time, my music side. So I bring that in there with that kind of humility. If I want to be of service to the world, I'm not making it about me. It's for everyone else. So let them decide, including about me.
Love that. Really, really love that. Thank you. And that makes complete sense. So it's more of an offering for you. And it's not necessarily, like you say, making it about you, but what you do and show can be an offering of yourself. And if people are interested, then they are, like you say. And if not, off they go. Yeah.
I visited a friend in London recently. She said, and it's the first time I met her husband, and she was like, it seemed like she was big. I don't know what she was doing, but one of the things she was doing was saying, the thing I love about Todd is he just says what he wants on Instagram, and half people are just like, oh my God, you can't say that. I was like, really? People say that? People like, I thought, well, I suppose they do probably roll their eyes at me or think, you know, what a so-and-so. But I was like, oh, wow, that would have bothered me once upon a time. But I think just to zoom in on that moment, it's like, how can you authentically connect with me as the practitioner of this work if you can't see me? But if I can see this, if you can see me for better or worse, then that's great information for you, the person who's out there looking in.
Because ultimately it's information for them to make a decision on, right?
Exactly. So I don't mind if I put people off. In fact, that's great. I know people say that, oh, put people off, but I'm not trying to put people off. I just think it's sort of easier around if I just be me, and then you decide if it fits. And perhaps some people are rolling their eyes and think, what that's crazy talk. Then clearly they're not for me. And in fact, that's probably to go back to the earlier thing where I said I avoided my niche. Perhaps I wasn't really as openly woo or as openly energy or as openly kinky as I am these days, because especially when I worked in Animas, it was like, I'm a trainer at Animas Center for Coaching. I know about coaching. Otherwise, what the hell am I doing training you? And I think that kind of forced me into more of a kind of coach box than was comfortable, which is one of the reasons that I needed to move on from that. So which is one of the reasons now it's easy for me to say, yeah, I'm not the expert in coaching. I'm expert in a bit of coaching, and it was right for me to teach the presence module. That was absolutely my expertise. But now I've got so far into that sentence, I'm like, where are we, Brinsley? I'm so far down the stream of my sentence, I forgot the riverbanks of the beginning.
Well, no, I really appreciate you going back to that point, because it was something I did wonder when you were speaking about you're a practitioner now and you're bringing in all these elements of you, and how you've left Animas as a trainer. And I wondered how that weighed down on you. And I don't know if that's the right word, weighed down on you, but I wondered how that influenced you being a trainer, because we put those Animas jackets on when we work for a profession or a company, right? And what I hear you say is that it did have an influence on perhaps how you showed up in the world.
Yeah, I think thinking about that, say, Animas jacket, running with that metaphor, there was a time it was like, oh, this is a great fit. Wow, I always wanted to be an Animas trainer, and loads of learning here. And I love Animas, amazing staff. God, I still miss being in those trainer meetings with these amazing minds and the learning and all that. But after a while, I was like, something inside was burst. Like, the jacket is fitting less and less. And it became, I think I might just have to take this thing off. And then my mind was like, are you crazy? You know, you're training at this school where people would kill for that kind of job. It's got some great income. You've got all this visibility. Even my ego was like, I'm a trainer at Animas Center for Coaching. It was like, why would you do this? Like, because it doesn't fit me and what wants to expand within me. So yeah, that once I took that jacket off, I think going back to our earlier story of why this practitioner empowerment thing now, is because there's that room. Yes, I had that metaphor of the ship was building itself. I think all these things can be true at once. The parts hadn't yet revealed themselves, but perhaps as they did, it's like someone was like, okay, I'm ready to put this out in the world, but I can't do that if you kind of stuck in this Animas trainer jacket insisting that you're a coach when that's just a bit of what you do.
Yeah, it makes complete sense. Thank you. So just a couple of practical questions as well that I'm wondering as a coach, and I think other coaches might be wondering. where do your clients come to you from? You mentioned about putting offers out there in the world. What social media do you use? How do clients find you?
Well, so far it's been referrals and word of mouth. And I'll get onto the next bit, but yeah, referrals and word of mouth and old clients coming back. Because what I've noticed is, so when I first started training and opened the doors to begin with back in 2017, I got a lot of what I called low-hanging fruit. Oh, various friends and practitioners who know me over the years were like, oh, I bet a session with Todd would be interesting. And they all came as clients, and then they all effed off after a certain amount of time because they'd kind of been through their evolution. But that, they circle back because life is, cyclical in terms of the journeys and evolutions we go on. So the longer I work, the more the pool of clients come that may come back across the years. So it becomes this sort of system of referrals from, they come back, but also they refer me onto their friends. So that's certainly kept it going a lot. But at this point as well, I'm also interested in where might other people come from beyond that system, and I think for me, a growing edge for me is beginning to perhaps look at LinkedIn and Instagram or other ways of meeting people beyond the horizons of my known network. I'd love to get a client who's like, wow, I happened to see this post you did on Instagram and I have no idea who they are. But that hasn't happened to me before. Most of the time it's people who I know or referrals. But so something about that, I'll hand over to you.
Yeah, but I guess it also speaks to the point that you didn't want to be someone that had to post in order to get clients. I need to post every day on social media, otherwise no one's going to come to me. And I think most practitioners would want what you have, word of mouth and referrals. I think that would be what everyone would aim for. And if we go out into the world and do podcasts and posts, great, there's a bit of extra visibility there. Would you agree with that?
And this is where the evolution comes, because half my brain is like got a different answer to the other half. So I'm just going to pick one. Certainly the old part of me, this half, would be like, I'd love to get clients and referrals and so on. And much rather that than have to post and so on. But another part of me feels like there's something in sharing self with world and visibility that is interesting to me, but not in the way that I thought. And I think to me, it comes down to intention. Is what is your intention when you post? If my intention when I post is to get clients, then that doesn't feel good. That feels like, well, you're posting to get clients. So that doesn't feel empowering even. But what I'm noticing in me is I have a genuine curiosity for the work and wanting to unpack that more and even research that. I've got some kind of researchy geek. We spoke earlier about what part of my formative years. When I was 12 or something, I wrote a whole book on the fox. I got every book I could find on the fox and I hand wrote it up in this massive manual on the fox. Who does that? Wow. I mean, I could have been doing something like, once I discovered alcohol and had hormones, I probably threw that Fox book in the bin. But at the time I wanted to research, I wanted to collate, I wanted to think through. And I find that part of me coming out now. I'm doing these retreats, also things like supervision sessions in the sculpture garden and this thing over here. And how does this connect? And how does this connect? And I'm almost going mad. I have to sit down and kind of write and research this. But I feel like that can then go into the world, and that might inadvertently end up being part of not necessarily marketing, but a conversation about the work that becomes incidentally part of the visibility / marketing, if you see what I mean. But that's not its intention. Its intention is, if I don't write this stuff, I'm going to go crazy. Plus, it's super interesting. But once I've done it and do it, I think it might be the way in which I move forwards in terms of sharing stuff on social media and so on. So I would see more of that of like, becoming genuinely part of the conversation around coaching, supervision, and practitionerhood from a place of authentic curiosity than I need to write something to stay visible.
Mm-hmm. Got you. Yeah. Thank you. Really interesting, I guess. I wouldn't say approach, because I guess that feels strategic, but interesting, I guess, internal philosophy or way of being that you've noticed that you have. I'm just noticing time, Todd. I could keep going for probably another hour. I love this. But I'm going to kind of try and land some things here. What I'm taking from this personally is the amount of work that you've done on yourself and the experiences that you've had that help you show up in the space as an amazing practitioner. The one I think, quote that you mentioned, or kind of one of those memes we hear is, you can only go as deep with other people as we have with ourselves. And you were literally there naked, in workshops, doing the work. And that's how you show up in this way that ultimately gives you these word of mouth referrals. And you've been very much experiential as you build your business. It's not about having this infrastructure. It's like, well, let's just bring it on and let's see what happens, and we'll build the wings on our way down, so to speak. Would you say that's a fair kind of summary? And I wouldn't say summary. Is that a fair reflection of what I've heard today?
Yeah, I think so. And to go on that last point, that experiential piece, build the wings on the way down, I think there's been a threshold on that around that. At a certain point, it's like, okay, you're going to need an engine or you're going to hit the floor. Or going back to that, there's so much flow and so little structure, it's out of balance. So for me, some of it has been how much flow can there be before the river becomes a swamp and that. So it's just something about that. Yeah, but I think that's a fair reflection there. And there's something in there when I hear that back as well. It's like, we sometimes separate, this is the work and this is the business. But sometimes I think the way the work works affects the way the business works. And perhaps what I mean by that is, like, I decided to run these retreats because I wanted to connect with people in deep, intimate ways, in a way that would allow them to drop and have a bigger space for self-exploration out of a city in a natural environment with sort of lots of arts and fire and primal elements. But inadvertently, that's also become part of my business. But the intention was for it to be part of the work. But yet they're intertwined, aren't they? So.
And speaking about your retreats and what you do, it'd be great to hear a little bit about what your vision is for the future. What are you hoping to develop more of, and what are you hoping to bring in to your practice?
Yeah. When I hear that question, I think, thank F I have a VA, because there's a certain amount of creativity and stuff in me that becomes unwieldy. Like I can't, like, it's too many articles, too many ideas. It doesn't become manageable. I think having the VA is making me even relaxed right now to answer your question. So in terms of where from here, I think I'm doing the retreats in person, but I want to start doing also one-to-one sessions in person. That could be 90 minutes. It doesn't have to be a retreat or nothing. So I want to start working in terms of the local area. I feel like a lot of my business built by default. People online coming towards me during Corona times, all that kind of thing. But actually I moved around 2020 to this local area, and I feel like I want to go more into the local area and build relationships with people around here. And so something about making my business more local is definitely part of it. Collaboration's definitely part of it. There's some people in the Animas community who probably know that I'm potentially running with retreats with next year as co-practitioners. So really looking forward to that. Definitely wanting to, and I'd be curious if this happens. I mean, I'd like it to happen. I think, like I said, I'd probably get mad if it didn't happen. But something about starting to put pen to paper around ideas and creativity. I do put pen to paper in terms of things like poetry. I quite often write poems, and I think, going back to our earlier marketing conversation, I'm not writing poems and putting them out there to get clients. It's just I'm writing poems. But people who see those poems get a sense of my spirituality in depth and go, oh, okay, there's something there. But also, I'd like to write across the spectrum, academic articles, lots of that kind of stuff as well. I've written a few in the past, and I really enjoy that. So something about writing, I feel like I'm starting to speak even faster because, like, the clock's ticking. And have I got a few more minutes to cram the rest of this answer out?
We do. Yeah. We can roll for a few more minutes for sure. Anything to add?
Well, yeah, I think part of it also, the term that comes is playing my range. So as much as I might be spiritual, woo, kinky, artistic, deep, all the things we talked about today, part of me is also loves vanilla conventional coaching. And I think there's this term I spoke to a lot of people recently about, which is the safer, the wilder. And I think when I do these day sessions, actually having really crisp outcomes and contracting and some of the things we spoke about, but even in terms of ICF competencies, really help this be coherent and cohesive and not just this giant blob of mayhem. And I think actually that's given me more respect for coaching, more respect for competencies, and more respect for clarity around just even things like measures of success and things that perhaps in a smaller session I'd be like, whereas in a bigger session, it's like, well, no, if someone comes all the way for a day and doesn't get any kind of outcome that they wanted, that's not going to feel great. So I'm more aware in a way of those kind of things. So part of me is like, notice that, because I want to get better at coaching. initially it was like coaching's too much. Now I think I want to get better at it as a tool that I can put back in the mix, if you see what I mean. So one of the things I'm starting to do is work with the ICF closer. So I've actually gone into the ICF, just started on the ICF board in the coaching and organizations team, because coaching and organizations is an area that I haven't been in because of my musical past. So that's kind of what that gives to me is the hopefully exploratory fascination of what coaching can be in the world on the cold face of the organization in a completely different environment to what I'm in. So there's something about that hopefully will bring competence, but also it's just curiosity. And the more I go over here, the more over here goes, wow, I don't have to be conventional because I'm being completely conventional over here. So I can be completely crazy. And this part's like, and I can be completely ICF conventions, like, yes. Yeah, they can join forces and you can have that kind of crisp coaching contracting around all of the crazy stuff. So to pull that into a shorter sentence, again, Mr. Long answers today, it's going to be something about playing the range. That for me is around really going on the wild side. I want to take my retreats into the woods as well. At the minute it's in a big house, country house, but I want to go into the woods, make them a bit wilder. On the other hand, really start listening to some MCC sessions, really start getting into that nitty gritty coaching stuff, thinking how can this make this better? And even vice versa, because I'm also interested in working with executives and thinking, got this term executive mojo. How can this help this? Because one of the things we haven't talked about is that along the way, Middlesex University pulled me in to do arts-based leadership development, running music sessions for leaders. And now I found that super interesting. So it's just something about being on that kind of adventure across the range, but also I would say a lot of it isn't known. And I like that. I have a vague direction, you know, but who knows, as Frodo and Samwise head out towards Mordor, what's going to happen along the way? I don't know it all, and I don't want to know it all. I'm open to being surprised.
I love that. Thank you so much. So much interest in there. And I totally get that notion that both those sides can feed into each other to make this really powerful experience that you're clearly already creating. But yeah, the writing, the retreats, and like you say, dipping back into the ICF core competencies and refining that toolkit. Where can people find you? Because I'm sure some people are thinking, well, where do you live? Am I local enough to come to you for these day retreats? Let's have a look at that. How do people find you and how can they work with you?
toddroache.com, myname.com. The retreats I'm running at the minute are in Gloucestershire, and some people train it from London, 2 hours on the train. I pick them up from the station and they stay overnight the night before, which I think I'm noticing more and more as part of it. So yeah, people are welcome to come from anywhere. But also a lot of that work, including the energy work and the deep work and the dark work and all the magical work, I also do online. So it's not retreats or nothing.
Gloucestershire, you're close to me. I might have to jump on the train.
Oh, wow. Awesome. Where are you?
Somerset.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, over the border. So my last question, when you look back at your business building journey so far, if you were going to give your old self some advice, what would it be?
Start your mailing list immediately. I haven't even started mine. My God, how much might I have missed on that? Because now I want to run groups and stuff. It's like, oh, it'd be great if I could just send out to my mailing list and be like, what mailing list? Like that was, yeah, start your mailing list. I'm not saying that as advice to other people. Like you said, to my older self, I would say, start your mailing list. Why not?
Do it. Thank you so much, Todd. Fascinating answers, really interesting exploration. I really appreciate your honesty and everything that you've given today.
Thank you so much for holding a beautiful space, Brinsley. I feel like you've been really warm, accepting, insightful. You seem to have kept track of my long answers. I felt like even at times I'm like, I didn't even know the beginning sentence, but let's just keep going. You seem to be open to it. Hopefully for the listeners, there's been something interesting and you've held a beautiful space. So thank you for making me welcome.